Digital Foundry is proudly sponsored by Omen's new wireless range of mice, keyboards and headsets. Shown off in a 13-minute gameplay reveal, Black Myth Wukong came out of seemingly nowhere to impress us all at Digital Foundry, and really for good reason. The ambition here is huge. From its fantastical concept art, focusing on the Journey to the West legend, to the execution using Unreal Engine 4. It's in pre-alpha, we should say, which raises a question of how much in the way it plays will end up in the final product, and the technology as well. So to chat about the trailer as it plays out, I've got a fully ray-traced Alex Battaglia on board. How's it going?
I'm doing well here, Tom. Enjoying this trailer as it shows off some very nice scenic Unreal Engine 4 kind of stuff going on in the background here, and probably without ray tracing, but that's something we'll get into a bit later on. But one of the things that kind of really stood out to me immediately when watching this trailer after it came out was the quality of the assets as well as the frame rate as this plays out. As far as I know, this trailer was recorded on a PC in a developmental build of Unreal Engine 4 running at 1080p and 60 FPS. If you look at the more pristine 1080p footage, which we have access to here, you can actually see that the aliasing does line up with 1080p pixel counting, which is pretty good.
I suppose we should set up what this actually is, where it came from. I mean,
yeah, right.
We know it's probably PC running the pre-alpha, but it is planned to release on consoles as well. No word on next gen or anything, but the word is out there. But yeah, it's developed by a Chinese studio, Game Science, who are made up of former Tencent employees who worked on an MMO called Azura. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea behind it is just incredible. I think it's a wonderful concept. Like, it's the Journey to the West legend. You know, we've seen a lot of times in Dragon Ball Z, games like Enslaved from Ninja Theory. So we've seen this story, but never quite realized with such incredible scenery, such detailed forest environments and effects work, which we'll see.
I think one of the things that you really take notice of right away is actually the detail on the ground, even though it's a little bit unfair to say that this is a Souls-like game, I would call it, in terms of the you are single Z-targeting enemies while moving around them kind of gameplay, and it seems like a very hard rhythmic combat. To me, it's Souls-like, but in those games, due to their current generation constraints on GPU and CPU, the amount of like scattered objects along the ground or in the environment itself is actually a bit lower. They do have like a good amount of geometric detail overall, but there's not a lot of moving tiny geometric detail. Like here in this Wukong trailer, you can see that each individual stone is modeled out. Or if you look at the leaves on the ground where each individual leaf, you can see it. It's actually a real object. That's just like the asset quality is the first thing that really catches your eye in this trailer. And from what I read online, some of this, because this is a Unreal Engine 4 developed game and is being made, you know, with like realistic constraints here by a semi-smaller studio, is that they're using the equivalent of like Megascan environmental assets for these. So they're like pre-packaged environmental assets for some things, not for the entire game, obviously, but you know, for like little rocks here and there.
It does give a good overview of how much is in there and the density of foliage elements, combined with what appears to be a parallax occlusion map effect for the mud tracks.
Yeah, definitely does look like that way.
Yeah.
It could be that or some sort of really good geometric piece. We'd have to like get really close to get a look. But also when they're in this kind of like flying bug mode, you can see that the geometry when the bug gets actually pretty close up manages to hold up in its detail surprisingly well, even without something like Unreal Engine 5's nanite in usage here.
Yeah.
Which is...
They must have designed it knowing that, okay, this is going to be a close-up shot. We need to squeeze as much detail from this small thing.
Yeah.
But now we're in the main action, you know, you can see, you know, a lot more. There's no more of that depth of field effect, which was pretty heavy-handed. You can get a good view of everything. And I guess so, you know, the reflection side of things really stands out. It is most likely SSR, right?
Yeah, you can see when the camera tilts downward that it disappears and returns to like a more sky-colored cube map. So yeah, it's just SSR in this. And the other kind of lighting things that we can see in here is Unreal Engine 4 does have actually pretty great static lighting. which you've seen in games like Final Fantasy VII Remastered or Remade, where that has pretty great indirect lighting, but most of it's static. If I were to take a guess here based upon the trailer and the fact that it does not show a dynamic time of day, there's almost no reason for this to be using something like ray traced global illumination or even something like ray traced ambient occlusion. I would imagine this trailer is probably just using very standard rasterization for everything visible.
I was thinking about what they could be doing here, because there's like a combination of lighting types that Unreal can use. You know, sky lighting's in here, we've got trees swaying and they cast shadow to the ground, but then there's also like, I guess, point lighting from within the effects of the bow, the fire here. And again, you know, it's not clear if we've got dynamic time of day, as you say, but I think given there's an experience with MMO design within the team, is possibly where they started. But then again, you know, having scripted weather would help, you know, push a story along and give you a kind of a narrative push where you can control all the variables. So yeah, we'll have to see on that.
One of the cooler things that, like, when you see it when it's hitting an enemy, or even just as some of the cutscenes play out, is what I like to call secondary motion. So when something is hit, there's like a secondary motion, not just from the hit itself, but like the character's clothing may move as well, or their hair may jiggle, or a bout of sparks may occur as a result. There's a lot of secondary motion in this trailer, like the small man character that they meet later on, where his cloth is just full of this, and like the little pipe he's holding also has like a tiny bag trinket on it that has sways with secondary motion. A lot of the kind of character design focuses on that, and generally cloth-like simulation or anything of that line, or hair simulation especially, is pretty expensive on the GPU side of things, and that's something we don't see too often for a lot of characters this current generation.
We see it a lot in games where there's a restriction on how much, you know, is really in view. Street Fighter V had a lot of these secondary animations like hair physics, clothes, all of that stuff. But it's not really so much a feature of big open world stuff like this from what I've seen in most games.
Looking at that old man, when he reappears and disappears into the scene, there's like smoke cast. And one of the really cool things that you can see through all this trailer is not only the really great effects work in terms of like GPU particles that you see flying around when enemies are hit, but as we get towards the end of the trailer, you'll see this as well. But there's what looks to be a fluid simulation on the smoke in the game, at least one of the smoke type assets that they use, where it is shadowed from the environment and it casts self shadows on itself, but it also moves like in a liquid like way, like real smoke does. It's like a fluid in the air.
We don't get to see what happens when you run straight through it, but in theory, if there's a dynamic there, that would be interesting.
Yeah, there is actually a scene directly at the end of the trailer where it shows the main character in some sort of like heaven-like setting among the clouds, moving along this kind of smoke. And each time they whack something with their stick or characters fly out of the way, the smoke actually moves alongside them, which is something we've basically almost never seen in games, excluding like two. There's the Batman Arkham Knight game on PC. If you turn on the Fluid PhysX option, it was a very expensive option. So seeing this natively brought into Unreal Engine 4, which does not support it, by the way, by default, it's pretty cool to see. It's one of the first times we've ever seen anything like that, and you definitely don't see that at all on current generation consoles, excluding for some like that Claybook game has something similar.
Yeah, there's a lot of great animations and character modeling all around in this that I think just stands out. The old man is one, but it's just full of it, and it all flows at 60 FPS on whatever rig they're using, helped along by that motion blur. There's lots of per object motion blur as well. I suppose the only limit really is that there's only very basic lip sync on characters so far. It's a bit like, you know, again, going back to Souls, but it's a bit Souls-like in that way. Not too much emphasis on close-ups. There's a lot of full body motion capture to help along with attacks with the rod, and it all just flows so beautifully.
Going into that secondary animation when he's fighting what looks like a werewolf kind of creature, or a giant dog. I don't know exactly what it is, but all the fur on that creature also moves with secondary motion as the creature moves along.
Oh, it's incredible. It really is.
It really works out. I think we've seen a little bit of that with a less density in a game like Bloodborne, but it's definitely not as dense as you can see here.
It was added to the more recent iterations of the Souls Bloodborne engine. Previously, we've seen like in the older Souls games, sort of a first shell, which basically is like layers of alpha. And if you get too close to it, yeah, your performance will tumble as well. So we had issues with that. But this one, it looks like very individual tufts all swaying independently. And the wonderful thing about it is they're all lit very kind of accurately. There is some dithering. I think towards the end you can see like up close there's a sort of dithered effect on the strands, but there's a kind of edge lighting when he faces away from the moon and you can just see the silhouette. It's really, really awesome. And this goes on for a while, so...
Yeah, it does. Showing off a lot of the larger battle types. Your character can like clone themselves multiple times, showing off a lot of the same animation over and over again, which, once again, if you go back to current generation console considerations, there aren't usually a lot of animated characters on screen at the exact same time in a game like this, holding 60 FPS. I really think this game shows that off incredibly well.
My take is that just gorgeous art, really gorgeous art, that the kind of which is enhanced by what Unreal Engine's toolset can bring. It's hard to tell what is and isn't scripted in here. Parts of what's shown are kind of the ideal playthrough, a vertical slice almost, like during this beast boss, you've got him jumping up to the rafters and breaking tiles and doing all sorts of things which basically just show off the best case. But at the same time, everything here looks really polished in a way that you could just imagine very well playing it at any point. The whole game looks familiar enough from a gameplay design that you could probably pick up and play this boss section and enjoy it in much the same way it's been played. Yeah,
just probably not it looking as cool because you don't know how to play it as well as they do, or if, maybe they have God mode on or something like that.
I imagine invincibility. Later on, we get a snippet, sort of a montage of all the later areas that you're going to go to. So it shows the team has been working on the full game, and it's there's a full package waiting to be explored here. But I don't know, what's your take? Can you see much of this being playable and just as is, when it releases, or do you reckon there'll be changes gameplay wise, tech wise?
I think in terms of technology, I think it will stay much the same. It's just that there will be a really heavy optimization pass, even for next generation consoles, depending upon their frame rate target. Like, this was shown off at 1080p 60, so maybe they've only really optimized the game for this resolution and frame rate. If they want to push to higher resolution, like next gen consoles will definitely be trying to run at, maybe they'll have to change up the way the assets look or something like that. But right now, this is very probably heavy at 1080p 60 if I had to take a guess. But I think it's an amazing first showing for a game from a relatively unknown studio that captures the imagination of many people. And for me, there's a number of graphical techniques on play here in terms of the environmental density, or that really cool smoke simulation that you just don't see in current generation games at all.
Alright, let's wind this up. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any video lands.
If you liked this video and want to see more like it, support Digital Foundry on Patreon to get years worth of Digital Foundry content available in high quality for download.
And if you want to get in touch with Alex, myself, or the rest of the team, just use Twitter. But from the both of us, thanks for watching. Featuring its new Warp wireless technology, Omen's PC peripherals allow for lag-free gaming. From the 360-degree audio of its Omen frequency headphones, the 180-hour battery life of the Vector mouse, and the 2.4 GHz connection of its Spacer keyboard, Omen has you covered for the ultimate wireless experience.